Good evening, friends, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I take great pleasure in welcoming all of you to this webinar on a book release function of the book on transforming Indian managers, book written by Dr. Indira Parikh, along with Mrs. Bharti Venkatesh. Uh, uh, Professor Indira Parikh is president of ANTARDISHA, which is an Ahmedabad-based organization, and she is also the founder president of FLAME, which is Foundation for Liberal and Management Education, Pune. She has been involved in creating academic vision for holistic and liberal education and shaping FLAME. She has also conceptualized the thresholds of life, life space, life roles, and identity. Her focus is on transformation and lifelong learning, development, and growth. Professor Indira Parikh has done MEd from the University of Rochester, New York, USA, and doctorate from Gujarat University. She was faculty at IIM Ahmedabad, and I have been fortunate enough to be her student in the year 1975 to 1977, along with her mentor, Dr. Pauline Garg. So I had some wonderful experience in the interpersonal relation and organizational behavior courses offered by them. She was a faculty at IIM Ahmedabad for over 30 years and dean from 2002 to 2005. She has also taught at INSEAD, Fontainebleau, France, and Texas A&M University. She is on the board of several companies as independent director, and she has also received many lifetime achievement awards both nationally and internationally. And she has written numerous articles which are published in national and international journals. And her new book on transforming Indian managers, which she has co-authored, which has been co-authored by Mrs. Bharti Venkatesh, a practicing psychologist, is really one of the, I think, innovative thoughts from Professor Indira Parikh, based on thematic perception tests and based on storytelling and learning through storytelling and transformation through storytelling. And it is really a very nice concept and very interesting concept. And for me, at least, it is something new, which I have come across something new. And I now welcome Professor Indira Parikh and leave the floor open to her so that she can make her presentation on the presentation and then formally release the book later. Professor Indira Parikh, welcome. And
thank you, Rajaram.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all the listeners. I hope your family, your relatives, and your friends are all safe and sound. These are difficult times and very trying times, but I use this time to finish this book with Bharti Venkatesh. Bharti and I go a long way. When I was in IIM, she was working at IIM as an academic associate. And she was part of a lot of my consulting assignments and looking at reports and discussions. So finally, when I've come back from Pune after 10 years, this book was pending. So we said, let's just finish it. Now this book it's all about stories and how stories tell about your character, about your identity and what is happening in the space you are in. This work began, as Rajaram said, in IIM Ahmedabad with my mentor, Professor Pauline Garg. we used to give these tests, this thematic apperception test. It is a test which was developed in the US in the 1930s and was heavily used after the First World War. When the soldiers returned home, they were traumatized by the war and they could not speak about what their experience was and what was really traumatizing them. And they were not coming out of the depression, they were not coming out of the fear, they were not coming out of the anxiety. So the author of this test designed this 30 situational photographs and asked the people to write stories about it. So in that situation, the war returned soldiers could write about their experiences. And that is how this projective methodology test came into being. It was then being used as personality diagnosis if there were any pathology. But in IIM, Professor Garg started using it as to look at the personality issues and how to help students look at what was happening to them in the here and now, in the present life. So there were 120 students, and for 3 years we did that. So we interpreted about 600 plus stories. And it made a lot of sense. And because they were stories written by them, the connection could be much faster and much easier. Then I went to France, and as luck would have it, that very same day, the faculty was discussing the TAT stories written by the students at INSEAD. And they were doing it for their achievement, what their motivation was, and with their husband and wives, because that was a program where wives were there. So, and because I had done so many stories, I joined in and I started interpreting, and the faculty was quite surprised that I could do it. And that is where I discovered the cultural element of storytelling. Earlier we were doing personality element. There I discovered the cultural element because there were German students, there were French students, there were Italian students, there were Swiss students, and there were British students. And the whole group of British students and women, the stories were quite different. For example, there is a card on which a man is on a rope. Most of the women there had written the story about a prisoner trying to run away, but finally getting caught. Talking to them, we discovered that the women were very unhappy being there because some of them were professionals and were working before they got married and came here. And here they were feeling quite trapped, and they did not have much to do. The husbands were in the classes and studying, and they were only managing a home. So they were quite uncomfortable with their own state of being. And similarly, we discovered that the German stories were quite similar in pattern and reflected elements of their culture. The French, the British, so I discovered the cultural element of the use of these tests. When I came back, we started in the early 90s. For the first time, I used the test as a means to help managers transform. And I'll give you how the transformation is visible. I gave it to about 130 people, and I saw that each level of the organization stories were quite different. The supervisor's language was different, their issues were different, and it was a workshop. So what we did was, first they took the test, then we interpreted individual stories. In the evening, we formed groups and they would discuss the managerial issues which they were confronting. The second day, they would discuss the interface issues, that is the interactive issues which they were confronting. And the third day, they would write about the organizational issues. And if I put the three kind of issues together, the language was different, the problems were different, it has to be different. And it was easy to help them transform because a word change here and a word change there made a lot of difference. For example, there were 7 cards which we used quite frequently. 1, 4, 5, and 7 were single person cards. Card 2 and card 6 were two people cards. Card 3 was a group sitting around a table. Now the cards 1, 4, 5, and 7 went through sequence. The first was a young man. Fourth was a man on a rope, which looked at achievement, which looked at ambitions, which looked at aspirations. The sixth card was about a successful man sitting in a plane traveling. And they just reeked of success. There was a glass in his, a pair of glasses on his hand, a book in his hand, and he was looking out of the window, thinking of, the look was far away. And the seventh card was a man in the evening, nobody in the office, working alone, with lots of papers strewn on his table. So one was a success card, one was a failure card. So the whole 4 stories were separately written. And if you connected them, you could take out almost a pattern of what was happening to the individual and what could happen to him if he continued on the same track. Second and the sixth card were about two people relationship, a young man and an older man. Most of the time, the Indians wrote the stories about being a father and a son and having differences. And most of the time it was having differences. And the resolution came in the sixth card, which was a very different card, which was out in the open on a farmland. And there the resolution would come or not come. And there were 4 questions being asked in the story. Who are the people? What are they doing? What are they discussing? And what is the outcome? Most of the time in the supervisors and the younger people, there was no outcome because the outcome was awaited if the boss came. In the middle management, there were real issues about how the work was going on and what kind of struggles they were going through to do the work. The senior people had a lot more strategic stories. And recently I did a workshop for a group of people, a company, whose MD said these people are just not moving anywhere. I keep telling, but they're just not moving. So I said, okay, I will do this workshop for them and find out what is the issue. When I showed them the cards, there was no story. They were only description of what was on the card. So there was a photograph, there was a young man, there was an older man, there was a man on a rope, there was a man on a table, man sitting somewhere, but there was no story because they could not bring anything of themselves to the table for the organization. They could only see what was there and what was to be done. The organization was making a profit because the orders were there. But to make the organization dynamic, these people had to initiate something, but they could not initiate. And we went through each story of the person and see, they had been in the organization from the very beginning. They had started out with the owner and they were there for 15, 20 years, but they were not used to taking any independent decisions and they were only used to taking instructions. And now they had reached a level of position where they were senior managers, but they were just not moving. And once this was identified, it was still very difficult to get them to move because they had just not done it. And then we recognized that it was not really their problem. It was the leadership issue because the leadership would want them to come and talk to them and take approval for every small item. If the leadership could not let go and let them do what they were supposed to do for 25 years. I'll give you an example of one other company. Long time back, I was doing a consulting. And the managing director said, okay, my people they keep asking me for small things. So I said, okay, let me come and sit in your room and you forget that I'm in your room and just do whatever you are doing all the time. And I sat in the room for about 4 hours. Every time somebody came, because I was sitting, he would say, no, go and do it on your own. And there was a surprise of horror on the faces of people. How come all of a sudden we are asked to do something on our own? But just as they were leaving out of the door, they said, whatever you do, you check with me first. And therefore I told him, I said, look, you are just not letting go of your authority and power and let them become responsible people. Now, storytelling is something which is, if you do the content analysis, you can really help the participant identify where they are caught because it is their story. Sometimes they start saying, but this was the card which we saw and that was only what was there. I said, true, but why did you not write a story? Or if you wrote a story, the story is yours. Therefore, we are looking at the stories. Now, in this book which we wrote, we have, first we have written about a historical perspective about how the organization in India have grown from the time of the 50s and the 60s. That time the environment was so simple, the organization was just struggling to become formalized. Organizations were just introducing a formal structure. I've seen the times when the first time the concept of corporate structure was being introduced in the organization. And the corporate structure was moving out of the production plant and going to the office which is away in the city. And this transition was very painful for people because people were so used to having the owner come manager or the MD sitting in the office on the premise of the production. Now, I'll give you one example. I was doing one study in Indore, and the owner, the leadership himself wanted to do go on to expand and grow the organization in multiple directions. But the workers were so used to the MD being there around all the time and treated him as a father figure that when he left and set up a corporate office, they all thought there was a death in the family. And I was visiting the organization at that time, and they were all sitting in a group waiting for the leadership to come. And they were sitting as if they were in mourning. So I went and asked them, why are you sitting like this? And they said, Benji, we have become orphans. I said, what do you mean orphans? Said, my boss just doesn't come here anymore. He has abandoned us. He's only sitting in his corporate office. Now, corporate office is his home and corporate people are his children, and we are abandoned as orphans. Now, this is the cultural context of India. It's very easy to understand if they write a story. So stories are very powerful mechanism of being able to transform people. Now, the third chapter is basically about the stories written by the participants and we doing the analysis. And finally, we have identified what are the ways, some theoretical frameworks, some concepts have emerged out of these stories. Because when we discuss stories or when I do work, it is always the theoretical frameworks emerge when we are discussing the data or when we are discussing the stories. We don't go with the concept and a well-established concept and theory from somewhere else to start the program. The concept and theoretical frameworks emerge. So whatever they are in the book, this is a contribution by the people whom we have worked with, because they have shared and because they have been open to discussing issues with us. It has been easy to get concepts. And so now I'll just tell you what are there are 5 chapters in the book. Rajaram, I can talk about the book now. Rajaram?
Rajaram, sir?
Yeah.
Can I talk about the book now?
Yeah, we can release the book now. We can, you can show the book on the screen to everybody.
Yeah, you are showing it, so.
You can also. So this is the book. I think online, this is the only way we can formally release the book. Okay, now we have formally released the book. Now you can talk about the chapters in the book, Indira, please.
Okay, thank you. There are 5 chapters in the book. Each chapter has a synopsis first, So you know what is in the chapter. The first talks about the historical history of growth of the organization. And we have looked at the decade of the 50s, the decade of the 60s, decade of the 70s, and decade of the 80s and 90s. Each decade has clarified and brought new concepts and new clarity of the organization's growth in India. The corporate structure, the strategy, the vision, the concept of vision, the concept of growth. And in the late 90s, it became apparent that Indian organizations could become global organizations. Indian organizations could be multinationals in other countries. There are many organizations which are considered MNCs, which are Indian organizations in Thailand, in Malaysia, because these are Indian organizations which are now based there. So the growth of these organizations from one location to, and a few people with the owner come manager, to a formal professional organization, the rise has been over each decade, there has been a growth. In the second chapter, we are looking at how this whole concept of methodology of storytelling, how the storytelling is useful in transforming people. And as I said, it becomes much easier because if the participants have written the story, they can see the connection far more easily. And if we can just push them a little bit, they can really rewrite the story quite differently and are amazed that they can do so. For example, when the story is written that the person is working and then there is really no end. And if we would push the participants, say, why don't you write a positive end? Then say they would write the man will be successful in his work and get a raise. Now, just this fact that it is possible to make it successful and it is in their hands to make it successful, it becomes successful. It becomes possible to, and when we look at their managerial issues and organizational issues over a period of time, even the language changes. For example, in the first instance, they will talk about all welfare issues. The food is not good, the tea is not good, the timings are bad, the bus is like this and the bus is like that coming to work. But as we progress further, they start talking about how to do tasks, how to interact with people, how to get the product, the raw material on time, how to plan, strategize. These words start coming in the same people. Simply because they have written a story and one can analyze the story at the content level and then go to the underlying processes with themselves. Not what is wrong with the organization, what is it that they can do, what is it that they can initiate. And then we give examples of how initiating new dimensions does not really invite punishment. It is definitely better for the organization. The third chapter deals with the different levels of managers. One chapter deals with the middle managers, one chapter deals with the senior managers. Chapter 3 deals with the senior managers and their stories and how they take the leadership roles. And the fourth chapter deals with the what the problems in the organization the managers across levels have identified and what are the action plans which they need to do. And the last chapter deals with the organizational maturity. How do organizations become mature to be relevant in the times they are working? For example, in today's times, the organization maturity will come through HR people who will make sure that the people in the organization are working. Now, with all this lockdown, the lockdown opened up, and how do you bring people? the government is giving lot of instructions as what the people can do and cannot do. So the HR people have to make sure that the organization employees are protected in the organization, and also be sensitive that when they go home, they need to be protected. And I think for the first time, the organization recognized the importance and the significance of the migrant workers. Now, migrant workers, when they come and when they go home, there are two different worlds they live in. So now the HR will have to identify new ways of managing these people so that they are health-wise safe and they can continue to work, and they don't get COVID and they come and give COVID to other people. So the whole role of HR in today's time is going to change. So if the book gets written now, it would be written about all these stories and then how to manage all this in COVID time or beyond COVID time. Because it's now, I will also tell you a little bit more beyond this, that all of this is in the context of the culture of the society. Now, if we look at our Indian managers, they're very much influenced by their social primary system. Primary system is the family, influenced by society, influenced by culture. So unless you can help them look at what are the cultural elements which are impacting them, what are the social elements which are impacting them, they will not be able to change their behavior in the organization. For example, I said the stories number 2 and 6 were largely about father-son stories rather than superior, senior, junior stories, because these were work-related places and the stories needed to be about work relations. But all the stories were about father-son. And then if you translate the father-son into senior and junior authority figures, the kind of dilemmas the people were having in the organization were exactly the same dilemmas they were having in the social system. So the social system dilemmas which were unresolved were brought to the organization. So we had to differentiate between what are the elements of a primary system and what are the elements of the secondary system, which is the organization, and how the two are very different, and the interface with seniors also have to be very different. It has to be around task, it has to be around goals, it has to be about objectives, it has to be about profit, it has to be about completing the tasks on meeting deadlines. Now, all of this became much easier to work with their stories. So we found that the stories are really a powerful mechanism of bringing about change in the organization in a very simple manner and very much related to the person, and the person is able to connect. These are not high funda concepts or theories, but now we are writing another book, Dr. Bharti and myself. It is on magic and mystery of storytelling, where the second part of what they write is we tell the story part of the way, and then participants complete the story. So we have found this, it's fun work, lot of fun work, and participants also enjoy it. But finally we get back to work and identifying the issues which are problematic in the organization and how they can be resolved without any conflict or issues arising and taking time, but very simplistic way it can be done. Will there be any questions, Rajaram? Rajaram, would there be any questions?
Yes, we have asked people to unmute themselves and then ask questions if they want.
So they can post the questions in the chat box and I can just read it out to you in case. Because
but in the chat box, I'm not seeing any questions. So
yeah, there are no questions. Only one book question is that I will just reconfirm and tell.
Yeah.
Other than, apart from that, any questions can put it in the chat box.
Anybody has got any question? See, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. There is no problem.
All right, I have said what I have said about the book. I have said about the methodology. I have definitely said that the transformation takes place and people realize the broader perspective of the organization, broader dimension of their own roles and their responsibilities, and differentiate between the primary system and the secondary system.
I have one question, Indira, that
Yes.
I just quickly browsed through the book. Now, you had shown 7 pictures, and out of that, there was only one picture on group related issue. So, but in an organization, the group related issues may be a little bit more. So I thought that why there were not more group related issues being discussed.
What had happened is in the group related, there is no story. If there are young people, they said they are chatting and they are gossiping. At the senior level, they're saying unless the top management comes, they need a senior person to guide the discussions. Otherwise, that card did not bring out any dimension, so we did not add any more.
Okay.
I almost used to let go the 3 stories, third card stories, because there was no story.
Yeah.
They would identify one man is standing, one man is sitting, one has a coffee cup. They only described the card, but not they wrote no story, except the boss isn't there. They're waiting for the senior management to come so they can start the discussions. On their own, they did not have any task-related discussions.
Probably we needed some pictures with people in an animated situation so that more stories could come out, probably. I don't know. I don't know.
No, but then I said I do the Prince story as another methodology, which brings out a lot of fun and games.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Gana Bajana in that.
Yeah.
So there are different versions of how you do the story as a methodology.
Yeah.
I did the story with women about a princess. And some of the stories I remember quite distinctly were amazing. They said the princess finally, the princess goes out on a boat with the husband, with the prince. She gets married to a prince, and there is a storm, and the prince falls down into the water. And what are these called? The people who come and rob the ships. What is the word? Pirates. The ship robbers come.
Yeah, the pirates.
Pirates. The pirates took away the princess, and the princess went, and she thought the pirate was brave, and the prince didn't do anything. So these amazing stories were coming out.
Indira, there is a question from Amit Gupta. He is asking, ma'am, being from defense background, we are groomed to lead by personal example. Is it applicable in corporate culture?
I really believe, yes. The top leadership needs to be exceedingly a role model. And he can be a role model only by living the values what he preaches. See, we talk about living by example. I'm saying he has to live by the values. Even in the family, this is what happens. If the father says, I'm doing this, so you do this, so that makes a lot of sense to the child. If the father is doing something else and giving him the advice or gyan, it doesn't work that much. So role models are very important, and the senior management, especially when the youngsters join the organization, it's very important to have a good role model as a boss. Then your whole approach to work changes.
Okay. There is one more question from Dr. Naresh Mehta. He says, can this theory be applied to MBA students in the campus?
Absolutely. We began by doing this work on the campus to make sure that they understood what is their responsibility. See, some bunking classes is a kind of a pastime, and we made sure that the students were self-disciplined, self-responsible, had an achievement aspiration, were ambitious. So this came out into the stories, because if they were not ambitious, you could not make them work. And it does give them a clarity. A lot of students in IIM took their stories to keep it with them, to learn from them. And because we used to do individual feedback, at evening time or afternoon time, we gave time to the students to come and do the analysis of the stories if they so wanted. And we identified some of their student behavior and its implications for managerial behavior, made a lot of sense to them. Because what happens is students don't see the implications of what they are doing today for tomorrow.
Right.
So if you can help them connect that your today's behavior is going to impact your life for tomorrow, it makes a lot of sense. Yes, the answer is yes. It helps the MBA students. It helps any student.
Yeah. Before I next question comes in, I have an announcement to make. This book will be available at AMA Media Outlet by Wednesday next week, and people can order it through to AMA and send the mail to AMA. They will courier it to your home. So anybody who wants to buy the book can go to order it through on AMA, and AMA will send the book to your home. They will courier the
Tell
book
the
to your
price
home.
also. Price is not much.
Yeah, price is
I think it's 275 or 300 rupees.
Yeah, 275. Price is 275
275,
rupees.
yes.
And you can order it on AMA. It's a paperback book, very easily readable. It has got only 175 pages, so I think very easily readable. I think very interesting. I quickly browsed through it today before the meeting for about 2 hours, and I found it very interesting. So you can order it on AMA.
The 7 cards are also given.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can see the cards and you can
Yeah.
see the stories of people written.
Yes.
And what it meant. So
Yes.
it's good helping to transform people.
Yeah.
I've seen people benefit from it and discover their talent which they did not know they had the potentials.
Right. There is one question again from Mr. Amit Gupta. Ma'am, is there a change in role of a manager in today's pandemic situation?
Is there a change? Yes, there is a change. See, you have to the manager has to become very much self-disciplined. You can get used to living at home. You can get used to sleeping late. You can get used to doing really enjoying the life at home. But what it does is it puts a tremendous amount of responsibility on you to be self-disciplined in terms of your work, how you work. See, I've seen people, this book has been written in pandemic time because there was a lot of time without interruption. You can do a lot of work without interruption and be self-disciplined and learn new things. Like you have learned cooking, Rajaram.
Yeah.
Now, I have written 2 books and I'm working on 2 more. But it's by 10 o'clock, I'm on my working table at my home.
Yeah.
And I work till lunchtime and my office gets the papers to be typed. So you have to be very self-disciplined. Yes, there is. And you can be very creative and imaginative and think about the organization and what good can be done for it.
Good.
Yeah. So there is a next question, ma'am. Sir, can I read it out?
Yeah, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Dr. Naresh Mehta has asked it. Are these cards available in big charts form?
Are these cards available?
I think he's referring to the 7 cards.
These are in the book also.
So are these available in the books?
It's available in the Google. You can get it because this is one test you can use without getting legal permission. Most other tests you have to pay something and it is intellectual property right. This is freely available on the web. If you type TAT or thematic apperception test, you will get the. And there is a place in Delhi where you can get these cards. There are totally of 30 cards, defining
31.
different 31 cards, yes. Defining different situations. Now,
Okay.
Dr. Bharti has become expert in doing personality. Being a psychologist, she can interpret those personality cards very well.
Yeah. So you okay? She will do online consultation also if people write stories and send to her.
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am, there's a next question. Which organization is offering these cards?
Now, what was the question?
Which organization? Some firm or some organization may have designed this card. So which organization is offering this card?
Who is offering these cards? Where do you get these cards? Somebody.
Oh, I will have to check with Bharti knows because it's in Delhi.
Okay.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Then, okay. Any other questions from anybody?
Anybody has any other questions, they can write to AMA. AMA will send it to me and I will sit and I will respond.
Yeah. I think I'm not getting any other questions, so I think then I would like to thank Indira and all the people who have joined the webinar, and it has been really very fast. Almost we did not know how fast the time went by. Almost 45-50 minutes. Very useful and very interesting discussion on how to do learning and development through storytelling. And I think it has been very interesting, and I hope that many of you, if you get the book and read it, I think you will find it even more interesting and useful. Thank you everybody for being with us this evening, and thank you Indira for taking time off. And,
thank you Rajaram for sharing this. I appreciate.
Yeah.
And I thank AMA, Ahmedabad Management Association, Mr. K.K. Nair, who organized all of this for me. So thank you AMA, thank you Rajaram. Thank you all my listeners. Thank you very much for being there.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, and have a good evening, everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. I will end the meeting here. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Chalo.